Have you ever felt like you don't recognize yourself, even when standing in the middle of all that people call success? This is the life of Evan Morgan, a billionaire with a vast financial empire, yet feeling empty, missing something that money couldn't buy. Everything changed when he unexpectedly met a poor little girl selling flowers to buy medicine for her father. In her hand, she held a photo of a man. That man was Evan, or at least a version of him from a life he never knew. Could two lives separated by society, but mysteriously connected by a bond, change everything? Join us as we explore this heartwarming story of humanity, sacrifice, and Evan's journey to rediscover himself in this video. The phone rang for the third time, its tone sharp and insistent. Evan Morgan paid it no mind. He had put it on silent a half hour ago after his last meeting of the day concluded. The soft golden light from his tablet illuminated his handsome, composed, yet almost emotionless face. Evan was not a man in a hurry. At 42, he had achieved everything one could dream of: a multi-billion-dollar financial empire, a penthouse overlooking the city's entire skyline, and a life meticulously scheduled down to the minute. His life was a series of numbers contracts and consecutive achievements. But numbers don't talk, and contracts have no feelings. Today was no different. After closing the acquisition of the country's largest pharmacy chain, a deal hailed as the pinnacle of his career, he felt a familiar emptiness. It wasn't fatigue, nor was it satisfaction. It was a hollow feeling. He sat in his office, his high-backed leather chair swiveling slightly. From the transparent glass window, he could see cars glittering like tiny moving fireflies on the boulevard below. This city, he had conquered it, but it remained a distant, noisy, and soulless entity. His assistant, Mark, knocked and entered. "Mr. Morgan, the investors are still waiting for you in the conference room. They want to congratulate you." Evan didn't even need to look at Mark. "Cancel," he answered curtly. "Cancel." Mark was surprised. "But this is an important meeting." "I said cancel." Evan repeated, his voice brooking no argument. "Tell them I have a personal matter to attend to." Mark knew not to ask further. In his 6 years of working for Evan, he had never seen his boss act so impulsively. Evan was always a man with a plan, a goal, and a rationale. Tonight, it seemed something else was quietly seeping into his soul. Evan stood up, grabbing his exquisitely tailored suit jacket. He left the office not through his private elevator, but by taking the public one. He needed air, needed to blend into the crowd, to feel a bit of the life happening outside his ivory tower. He strode along the sidewalk, feeling the late afternoon sun on his face. Everyone was in a hurry, glued to their phones, avoiding eye contact. He was a part of them, and yet completely separate. He slowed his pace, looking up at the sky. The clouds drifted lazily freely. They weren't in a rush, didn't have to close deals or race against anyone. They simply existed. A few miles away at the base of an old railway bridge, life was completely different. The wind was bitingly cold, swirling through the makeshift tarps, a constant reminder of the night's harshness. Lily 9 carefully struck a match, trying to keep the tiny flame on her improvised stove from going out. The first match fizzled out. The second did too. On the third, the flame finally took hold, dancing on her fingertips. She placed a small pot containing the meager amount of water left in a plastic bottle on the stove, waiting for it to boil. She wanted to make tea for her father, Ben Carter. "Lily, don't waste the water," Ben's voice whispered from the thin pile of blankets he was lying under. His once handsome face was now pale, deeply etched with suffering. "There's enough, Dad," Lily replied, even though she knew it wasn't true. The bottle was nearly empty, and the public water faucet in the park was a 20-minute walk away. The space they called home consisted of a few tattered blankets, two backpacks holding their few belongings, and a cardboard box lined with fabric where 8-month-old Leo was fast asleep. They had propped a tarp to block the wind and rain, forming a makeshift tent against one of the bridge's pillars. It wasn't much, but it was better than the public shelters which often separated families. Ben groaned and shifted in the blankets. "It's worse today," he said through gritted teeth. Lily knew what that meant. The medicine had run out 3 days ago, and they had no money to buy more. Without the medication, the pain would return with its full intensity, making it impossible for Ben even do the rare odd jobs he sometimes found. "I'll get money for your medicine today," Lily promised, her voice sounding resolute despite her young age. "I have a plan." Ben tried to sit up, but the movement contorted his face in agony. "I don't want you begging on the streets, Lily. It's dangerous." "I won't beg," she replied, handing him the cup of tea she had made. "I'll sell flowers." She gestured to a small bucket she had found in a restaurant's trash can and carefully cleaned. "I saw them in the park. So many flowers are blooming after the rain." Ben looked at his daughter with a mix of pride and profound sorrow. Since they lost their home a year ago when he became too ill to work consistently, Julie had been forced to grow up too fast. The death of Leo's mother during childbirth 6 months after they became homeless had only accelerated that process. Now she cared for both of them like a small adult, forgetting how to be a child. "Don't go too far," was all he could manage to say. Leo woke up and started crying. Lily immediately went to the makeshift cradle and picked him up. "He's hungry," she said, reaching for the last bottle of milk they had gotten from a charity center. "Take him with you," Ben whispered between coughs. "I'm not sure I can care for him today," Lily bit her lip. She knew her dad was right. On days when the pain was severe, he could barely move, let alone care for a baby. "I'll take him," she agreed, picking up a colorful piece of fabric her mother had left behind. It was the only memento she had of her mother. That and Leo's eyes, which were identical to his mother's. With a dexterity born of necessity, Lily tied the fabric around her shoulder and back, creating a carrier. She placed her little brother in it carefully. "I'll be back before dark," she promised. "You rest." The park was only a 10-minute walk away. Lily filled the bucket with the prettiest flowers she could find, staying away from the park ranger, who occasionally patrolled the area. The last time he caught her picking flowers, he threatened to call social services. "We'll get Dad his medicine," she whispered to Leo, who was watching the world with curious eyes from his perch on her back. Lily knew she needed to go to the city's wealthy district. She walked for almost an hour, carrying the bucket of flowers in one hand, occasionally adjusting the carrier that held Leo safely with the other. As she reached the avenue of skyscrapers, the midday sun glinted off the glass buildings. Expensively dressed people rushed past, avoiding eye contact with her. 2 hours passed, and Lily had only sold 2 flowers, earning a meager $10. Discouragement began to set in when she saw a man stepping out of the largest building on the avenue. Unlike the others, he wasn't looking at his phone but up at the sky, as if searching for something important in the clouds. Lily approached, adjusting Leo on her back. There was something about the man's face that made her pause for a second, something strangely familiar. Evan Morgan exited the building bearing his name with a persistent sense of emptiness he couldn't explain. The acquisition of the country's largest pharmacy chain was nearly complete, another achievement added to his impressive portfolio. "Mr. Morgan," his assistant called out in confusion. "The investors are waiting in the conference room." "Cancel," Evan replied bluntly. "I'm going out for a few hours." The assistant looked flustered but didn't dare question him. In his 6 years working for the Billionaire, He had never seen him abruptly cancel an important meeting like this. Evan ambled down the avenue, feeling the sun on his face. A strange urge had made him leave the office just to exist for a moment, to get out of his bubble of privilege. That's when he felt a gentle tug on his jacket. "A flower for my sick father, sir." Evan looked down to see a small girl. She was dressed in ragged, dirty clothes and had a baby strapped to her back in a colorful carrier. In her hand was a small bucket filled with wildflowers. Before he could respond, she extended a yellow daisy with one hand and a crumpled piece of paper with the other. "To buy his medicine," she said, unfolding the paper. "You look just like him." Evan automatically took what she offered. The photo showed a gaunt man sitting on a park bench holding a newborn baby. He was smiling despite his obvious frailty. It wasn't a casual resemblance or a child's exaggeration. The man was Evan's exact likeness. The same face, the same eyes, even a small scar near his left temple. It was like looking into a mirror reflecting a version of himself in another life, a life of poverty and hardship. Evan felt the blood drain from his veins. His hand clenched the photo until it crumpled even more. A strange buzzing filled his ears as reality seemed to warp around him. "You look so much like him," the girl repeated, observing his reaction. "We live under the old railway bridge. He's too sick to work." Evan couldn't answer. He couldn't even think straight. Mechanically, he pulled out his wallet. All he had were $100 bills. He took one and handed it to the girl, his eyes still fixed on the photo. The girl's eyes widened, locked on the bill. "This is a lot of money," she said softly. "Thank you, sir." What's your name?" Evan finally managed to ask, his voice sounding alien even to himself. "Lily," the girl replied carefully, taking the photo back. "And this is my brother Leo." The baby on her back gave a little cry, as if introducing himself too. "Now I can buy Dad's medicine," Lily said carefully, tucking the bill into her torn pocket. "You're a good man." Evan wanted to ask more. Who was that man? Why did he end up on the streets? Why did they look so alike, but no words came out? He was paralyzed by the shock of what he had just seen. "Have a nice day, sir," Lily said, already starting to walk away with her now slightly lighter bucket. Evan remained standing in the middle of the sidewalk, holding the yellow daisy, unable to move or call her back. In a matter of seconds, she had disappeared into the crowd, leaving him with questions he never imagined he would have. The city continued its frantic pace around him. People talked on their phones, cars honked, life went on. But for Evan Morgan, the solitary billionaire, nothing was normal anymore. Nothing made sense. He carefully placed the flower into the inner pocket of his suit, and for the first time in years, felt completely lost. His driver didn't ask questions when Evan got into the car. He was used to his boss's silence, but this silence was different, thick, almost tangible. "Home, sir?" the driver asked, looking through the rearview mirror. Evan nodded, unable to speak. His eyes were fixed on the yellow daisy he was still holding between his fingers. A simple flower that had already begun to wilt. A flower that had changed everything. All the way home, the image from the photo remained sharp in his mind. A man with his face not just a resemblance, but an exact match. The same jawline, the same eyes, even the small scar near his temple that he always thought was unique. The mansion was empty and silent when he arrived. 5,000 square feet of luxury, inhabited by a single person. Evan had given his butler and chef the night off, preferring his solitude. He went straight to his study, and locked the door, an unusual gesture for a man who rarely had guests in his home. He placed the flower on the mahogany desk and sat in his leather chair. On any other day, he would immediately open his laptop to check stock prices or review a contract. Today, he just stared at the yellow flower, his mind trying to process what he had seen. "A man with my face," he murmured to the empty room. Evan had known he was adopted since he was 18. His adoptive parents had told him the truth on his 18th birthday, handing him an envelope containing his adoption papers, but he had never opened it. He never wanted to know. His life was what he had built, not what he had left behind. Now, for the first time, he felt the weight of that decision. He stood up and went to the large bookshelf that covered an entire wall. Pulling out an old book, he revealed a small built-in safe. The combination was the date he made his first $1 million deal, a moment he considered his true birthday. From inside the safe, he took out a dark wooden box. He had never opened it. It was the only relic of his past he kept, a reluctant concession to a history he preferred to ignore. Sitting down again, he opened the box. Inside were some old photos. A 10-year-old Evan with his adoptive parents in a formal portrait. His graduation the day he bought his first building, and beneath it all, a yellowed, sealed envelope, his adoption papers, a origin he never wanted to explore. For 20 years, that envelope had been sealed. For 20 years, Evan Morgan had built an empire on the premise that the past didn't matter, only the future. But now his hands trembled as he held the envelope. The image of the man in that photo, the man living under a bridge, sick, caring for 2 children, would not leave his mind. It must be a coincidence, he told himself. But he knew he was lying. The resemblance was beyond any statistical chance. It was the kind of resemblance that could only be explained by blood. His finger traced the edge of the sealed envelope, hesitating. Inside were the answers, the names, the dates, the origins, perhaps even a mention of a brother, a twin separated at birth. But then he pictured the small girl. Lily, a little child with a baby on her back, selling flowers to buy medicine for her father, living under a bridge, bravely facing the vast city at such a young age. Evan let the envelope fall back into the box. He didn't need the old documents to understand what was happening. The answer was out there, alive, breathing in the same city. He closed the box and returned it to the safe. Turning back to his desk, he opened his laptop and began to type. He wasn't looking for his adoption records, but for something more urgent. The old abandoned railway bridge. The search results revealed an old structure on the west side of the city that had been closed 15 years ago when they built a new overpass. Since then, it had become one of the largest homeless encampments in the area. The authorities periodically threatened to clear out the people living there, but never followed through. It was a problem no one wanted to solve. Evan zoomed in on the satellite image, imagining what it looked like, imagining Lily Leo and the man with his face living under the concrete pillars, sheltered only by makeshift tarps and donated blankets. The disparity between their lives was absurd. While he slept on Egyptian cotton sheets, they slept on hard ground. While he dined at Michelin-starred restaurants, they probably went hungry. While his biggest concern was closing multi-million-dollar deals, they fought for survival every single day. And yet they shared the same face, the same blood. This was deeply unsettling. If that man was truly his brother, perhaps a twin, then why had their lives diverged so dramatically? Why was Evan adopted by a middle-class family who gave him an education and opportunities, while the other, what exactly happened to him, was left behind by the system, was not taken in by another family? What led them to such different fates? He closed his laptop and walked to the window. From his top-floor office, he had a panoramic view of the city. Lights twinkled in every direction like a field of stars. Somewhere beneath that radiant tapestry, 3 people were sleeping under a bridge, one of them bearing his face. His phone rang. It was surely his assistant, worried about his abrupt departure earlier. Evan didn't pick up. For the first time in years, business meetings and acquisitions seemed trivial. Night fell. Evan stayed awake. His mind was a storm of unanswered questions. Who was this man? How did he end up on the streets? What happened to him, and more importantly, what should Evan do now? The most logical answer was to ignore it, to pretend he had never seen the photo, never met Lily, and continue his life as before, isolated in his tower of glass and steel, shielded by money and power. But another part of him, a part he didn't know existed until that day, refused to accept that solution. A part that, despite all his efforts to sever all connections to the past, was now screaming to be heard. As the sun began to rise, Evan was still at the window. He hadn't slept, hadn't eaten. He had only thought, reminisced, and questioned. In his hand, the yellow daisy was now completely wilted, but its meaning remained intact, a symbol of an encounter that shouldn't have happened, a connection that wasn't supposed to exist. Evan carefully placed the flower on his desk. Perhaps he should throw it away as he did with everything else that was no longer useful, but he couldn't. Instead, he took a heavy book from the shelf, a first edition Hemingway he had never read, and placed the flower between the pages, a quixotic way of preserving something that had suddenly become precious. He changed his clothes, choosing jeans and a simple shirt instead of his usual tailored suit. He didn't know exactly what he was going to do, but he knew he had to do something. He needed answers that no old document could give him. He left the mansion as the first rays of sun touched the horizon, ignoring the barrage of messages on his phone, his packed schedule, the empire that demanded his constant attention. For the first time since becoming Evan Morgan, the billionaire, he was following something other than ambition. He was following a question that now refused to leave him alone. A question about identity, about origin, about connections deeper than conscious choices. A question about who he truly was. The city lights sparkled at Evan's feet, but they couldn't dispel the darkness in his soul. His luxurious penthouse, a symbol of power and success, felt like a glass prison tonight. He paced aimlessly from the living room to the balcony and back again. The dandelion, the little girl's gift, lay alone on the coffee table, already beginning to wilt. It was fragile, weak, but carried an immense weight, the weight of unanswered questions. He took the photo out of his jacket pocket. This time he didn't just look. He examined every detail. The man's gaunt face, eyes hollowed by illness, still held a hint of warmth as he looked at the newborn in his arms. Those eyes so strangely were identical to Evan's when he looked at himself in the mirror. The small scar on his temple, he had gotten it from a childhood accident, one his adoptive parents had told him about. But the man in the photo had it too. The coincidence was impossible. This was not a simple resemblance. It was a reflection. Evan had always believed he was the master of his own destiny. He had told his colleagues and reporters that his life began the day he closed his first $1 million deal, that the past was just an abstract concept. The fact that he was adopted, a truth buried under layers of success, had never affected him. Until tonight. This photo had shattered every defensive wall he had painstakingly built. He returned to his study where his tablet was still on. He typed in keywords related to the location, to the homeless, to the areas around the old railway bridge. The sharp, analytical mind of a billionaire businessman was working at full capacity, not to seek profit, but to find a person. The more he searched, the more clearly he saw the difference between the two worlds he and the other man were living in. On one side were numbers on the stock market. On the other were numbers of survival: $10 earned, a 20-minute walk, for water 3 days without medicine. He felt a strange sense of guilt rising within him. He had everything while the other man, the one with his face, had nothing. That injustice, not of society but of fate, constricted his heart. That night, Lily's sleep was restless. She held baby Leo tight, feeling the warmth of his body. In her dream, she saw the face of the kind man who had bought her flour. That face identical to her father's. But the man in her dream wasn't ragged or sick. He wore crisp clothes and had eyes that sparkled like stars. She didn't understand what the dream meant, but it gave her a sense of security, a vague belief that something good would happen. The next morning, Lily woke up early. She still had the $100 bill in her pocket. That amount, larger than anything she had ever had, was enough to buy medicine for her father for several months. She carefully washed her only shirt, cleaned her bucket, and prepared to go back to the park. Today, she didn't need to sell flowers. Today, she just needed to find that man to say thank you. But when she returned to the avenue of skyscrapers, he was no longer there. She walked around, looking at every man in a suit, but no one had a face like her father's. Disappointment crept in, but she didn't give up. She believed that just like the dandelions, that man would reappear. In his office, Evan couldn't focus on work. He had canceled all his meetings for the day, alarming his associates and confusing his competitors. Mark, his assistant, tried to contact him many times without success. Evan's only concern was finding Ben and Lily. He contacted a private investigator, the best in the business. Find a homeless man, thin, in his early 40s, with a face identical to mine. He lives under the old railway bridge and is with a girl about 9 years old and a baby, Evan said over the phone. His voice was unusually shaky. The investigator, a man used to strange requests, was still taken aback. "Sir, that sounds like a rather—" "Just do it," Evan cut him off. "As fast as you can." Evan didn't know why he was in such a hurry. An invisible fear was urging him on. He was afraid that if he didn't act fast enough, the other man, the one with his face, would disappear forever, along with the answers to the questions tormenting him. He was afraid he would miss the only chance to find a part of himself. While waiting for information from the investigator, Evan went to his private library. He rummaged through old photo albums, photos from his childhood and teenage years. He wanted to find a clue, some invisible link. He found a picture of himself at age 10, standing with his adoptive parents at a charity gala. He was wearing a small suit. His face was serious without a smile. He realized that the loneliness had been in him for a long time, even when he was surrounded by wealth and affection. Ben's smile in the photo, despite living in poverty, was more genuine and warm than any of Evan's. What had he missed? What had he lost? He felt a strange envy for the man in the photo. Envy, not because he had a family, but because he had such a fierce will to live. Ben had gone through things Evan couldn't even imagine, but he had still kept the flame of hope and love alive. Evan's phone rang. It was the investigator. "We found them, sir. Under the old railway bridge, as you said. The man's name is Ben Carter. His health is very poor." Evan said nothing. He just listened in silence. He felt a complex mix of emotions welling up inside him: relief because he had found them, anxiety because Ben was very ill, and a vague fear because he was about to face a truth that could change his life forever. He ordered his driver to prepare the car. He couldn't wait any longer. He had to go there, had to see Ben in the flesh. He had to know if the resemblance was a reflection of destiny or just a cruel coincidence. On the way, he held the wilted dandelion tight. He remembered Lily's words, "A flower for my sick father." Now he didn't just want to buy a flower. He wanted to buy a life back for the man with his face. The car stopped at the foot of the bridge. Evan got out, taking a deep breath. The smell of dampness of leftover food, the smell of despair wafted into his nose. The scene before him was completely different from the world he had lived in. Ragged tarps, shopping carts piled high with belongings, vacant eyes. He saw an old woman sitting mending a shirt. A group of young men were warming themselves by a fire. He felt like an alien who had just landed on a foreign world. He found Lily giving her brother Leo some milk. She was sitting next to a man who was curled up in a blanket, his face pale and in pain. It was Ben. Evan's heart pounded. He felt his hands trembling, a sensation he had never experienced in business meetings. He walked slowly, step by step, towards Lily and Ben. He stopped a few feet away from them. He looked at Ben's face, and then he looked back at his own reflection in the car's window. The resemblance was undeniable. No longer a reflection in a photo, but a real version of himself, a version that life had beaten down. "Mr. Morgan," Lily called, her eyes wide as she saw him. She wasn't surprised or scared, she simply recognized someone she had met before. Evan couldn't say anything. He just looked at Ben, who was now opening his eyes and looking straight at him. And then Ben Carter uttered a question, a simple question, that held all the pain and doubt of a lifetime. "You're adopted, aren't you?" Evan didn't answer right away. Ben Carter's question wasn't idle curiosity. It was an arrow shot straight through the armor he had worn for over 2 decades. He had spent his entire life building an identity, an empire, on the foundation of rejecting his past. But now that past was looking him straight in the eyes, with an undeniable weariness and pain. Ben lay there, his body trembling from another wave of pain. His hollowed eyes were fixed on Evan, as if searching for the answer to a question he had asked himself his whole life. "You're adopted, aren't you?" Ben's words were filled with bitterness, doubt, and a faint, pitiful glimmer of hope. "Yes," Evan finally replied. His voice was hoarse with tension. "I was adopted at 6 months old." Lily, sitting next to Ben, looked from one man to the other in confusion. She didn't understand what was happening, but her intuition told her this was an important moment. Ben closed his eyes. A single tear rolled down his thin cheek, disappearing into the thin pile of blankets. I always felt something was wrong. An empty feeling. A feeling that I had been left behind." Evan silently sat down on an old log a few feet from Ben. "Me too. But I chose to ignore it. I believed the past didn't matter. Only the future. And now," Ben asked, his voice filled with a challenge, "your future is a big mansion, a business empire. My future is lying here waiting for each day to end." That contrast, that cruel irony of fate squeezed Evan's heart. He couldn't deny the truth. They had started from the same place, the same blood, but had taken 2 completely different paths. He had risen while Ben had fallen. Lily, sensing the heavy atmosphere, took her father's hand. "Dad, don't say that. He's a good man." Ben gave a weak smile, stroking his daughter's messy hair. "I know. But you have to understand, Lily, nothing in this world is free, especially not from people like him." Evan stood up. He couldn't let Ben misunderstand. This wasn't charity, it wasn't a rescue. This was redemption. "I'm not doing this for money," Evan said, his voice firm. "I'm doing it for you. For the man with my face. Ben looked at him, a flicker of doubt in his eyes. You have everything. You've built everything. You don't have to take on my burden. But I need to, Evan replied, his voice softer. I don't have a burden. I have a chance to make things right. I have a chance to find a part of myself. Mr. Carter, I'm not asking you, I'm offering. Ben fell silent. He looked at Lily, who was anxiously holding his hand. He looked at Leo, who was sound asleep in the cardboard box. He had fought alone for years, enduring pain and humiliation, all for his children. But now he was too weak. He no longer had the strength to fight. How will you help us? Ben asked, his voice heavy with fatigue. Medicine food. That's only temporary. I'll take you to the best hospital in the city, Evan answered without hesitation. I'll pay for all the treatment. I'll make sure you get the best care. As for Lily and Leo, they'll be better cared for somewhere else. No, Ben cried out. I can't be separated from them. They're all I have. That's why we're here. The shelters separate families. They can come with you, Evan said. We'll go together. Lily looked at Evan. Her eyes were filled with surprise and hope. She believed in this man. She believed in a miracle. Evan's persistence melted Ben's tough exterior. He realized that this man hadn't come to give charity, but to help. He felt a tiny, warm spark of hope ignite within him. He agreed. He allowed Evan to take him. He had nothing left to lose. At the hospital, Evan used his name to ensure Ben received immediate care. The nurses and doctors were astonished to see the two identical men. One nurse even asked, "Are they identical twins?" Evan just replied, "Maybe," vaguely, because he didn't have a clear answer himself. Ben was taken for tests. Lily and Leo were brought to a private waiting room. This was the first time the two siblings had been in a warm, clean, and safe space. Dr. Reynolds, a kidney specialist, walked into the waiting room. He looked at Lily, then at Evan, full of confusion. "We need more information. Medical history, allergies." Evan pointed to Lily. "Ask her." Lily, still holding baby Leo, answered the doctor's questions with surprising precision. She talked about her father's blood type, his medications when the symptoms began. Dr. Reynolds was surprised, and he understood that this little girl had been forced to carry a far too heavy burden. The test results came in. Ben Carter had advanced chronic kidney failure. He needed to be on regular dialysis. "Why did he stop dialysis?" the doctor asked. "We didn't have the money," Lily answered simply with pain in her voice. "And he couldn't walk that far anymore." The doctor looked at Evan. Evan responded with a determined look. "Money will no longer be an issue. Do everything you can." As Ben was taken for further tests, Evan and Lily stayed in the waiting room. Baby Leo was fast asleep, as if sensing he was finally in a safe place. Silence filled the space. "Thank you," Lily said, breaking the silence, "for helping my dad." Evan didn't know how to respond. His life, which had only revolved around work and money, had been completely turned upside down. In just a few days, he had found a brother, a niece, a nephew, and a sense of purpose he had never had. Lily looked at Evan with tired but hopeful eyes. "My dad always said to believe in angels, that they'll appear when we need them most." She looked at Evan. "I think my dad was right." Evan looked at the girl. He, a man who always had an answer for every business situation, was now completely speechless. The girl didn't see a billionaire, a wealthy man. She saw an uncle, a family, an angel. And in that moment, Evan realized that his life had changed forever. He was no longer a solitary man. He had a family. 2 days passed like a nightmare for Evan. The hospital became his second home. He spent most of his time in the private waiting room where Lily and Leo had settled in. The girl with the serious expression of a mother tirelessly cared for Leo, read books to her brother, and answered questions about her father's health with astonishing accuracy. Her resilience pained Evan's heart. A 9-year-old child had carried too heavy a burden. During those 2 days, Dr. Reynolds updated him on Ben's condition. Chronic kidney failure end stage. He needs regular dialysis to survive. But for a normal, longer life, the best solution is a kidney transplant. The doctor's words hit Evan like a bucket of cold water. He was mentally prepared for a fight, but not one this difficult. He sat quietly, looking at Lily's crayon drawings on a piece of paper. Stick figures of a family, Ben, Lily, Leo, and a man in a suit. That drawing, simple but full of meaning, erased all doubt in his heart. He couldn't abandon them. He couldn't let Ben die. The thought of donating a kidney had crossed Evan's mind since he learned Ben was his brother. But now it was no longer a vague idea. It was a clear choice. He called Dr. Reynolds and told him his decision. The doctor looked at him with a confused expression. "Mr. Morgan, I appreciate your kindness, but donating a kidney is a serious decision. There are risks, recovery time, lifestyle changes." "I understand," Evan interrupted. His voice was low and firm. "But I'm the best match. I've had preliminary tests. We are twins." "Dr. Reynolds nodded. "If that's the case, you'll be the ideal donor. But even so, I need you to think carefully. You are under no obligation to do this." "Yes, I'm not obligated," Evan replied, "but I have the right to choose." He looked the doctor straight in the eye. "I'll donate one of my kidneys to him. Please prepare the necessary procedures." Evan decided to talk to Ben first. He went to Ben's room where Ben was lying on the bed, staring at the ceiling. His face was still pale, but his eyes had a little more life in them. "Lily and Leo are fine," Evan began. "Thank you," Ben replied, his voice still weak. "You've already done too much for us." "I've made my decision," Evan said frankly. "I'm going to donate a kidney to you." Ben turned his head, looking at Evan in shock. "No. That's impossible. You can't do that." "Why not?" Evan asked. Because you don't owe me anything. We're just strangers. You have a perfect life, a stable job, a bright future. I can't let you sacrifice everything for someone like me." Ben's voice was filled with despair. Evan sat down on the chair next to the hospital bed. He looked at Ben's face, at his pain, and his feelings of inadequacy. "Do you remember your question? You asked me if I was adopted, and I answered. You know, I've always had an empty feeling, a feeling that I had lost a part of myself. When I saw your photo, I found that part. You are not a burden. You are a part of me." Ben looked at him, his eyes red. He was used to fighting alone. He was used to accepting whatever life threw at him. But he was not used to receiving such a priceless gift. "You don't understand," Ben said, his voice cracking. "My life is a mess. I lost my wife, my home, everything. You have a dream life. I can't let you sacrifice a part of your body for me. You deserve to be happy." "What is happiness?" Evan asked. "Is it having a big house, a luxury car? Or is it having a brother to lean on, a niece and nephew to love?" Evan looked at Ben. "Ben, I don't want to live in a world without you. I don't want to live a life without Lily and Leo. I'm not doing this out of obligation. I'm doing it out of love. I choose you, Ben. Evan's words hit Ben like a thunderbolt. He had been through enough suffering to know that unconditional love was the rarest thing in the world. He was used to fighting for survival, to protecting his children. But he had never known how to accept help. Tears streamed down Ben's cheeks. He cried not out of pain, but out of emotion. Those tears had been held back for years. Now they poured out like a river. "Thank you, Evan," he whispered. "Thank you." The next day, Lily visited Ben. She carried a small backpack containing a new drawing. The drawing was of a family, but this time Evan's figure was drawn larger, and he was holding Ben's hand. "Mr. Morgan told Dad about donating his kidney," Lily said, her voice full of admiration. "Dad said, 'You're an angel.'" Evan, who was standing at the door, smiled. He felt a warm feeling spread through his chest. He had never been called an angel. He had always been called Billionaire, Boss, Mr. Morgan. But Angel was the title he cherished most. Dr. Reynolds walked into the room. He had overheard the conversation between the two brothers. He looked at Evan with admiration. "Mr. Morgan, I've seen many people donate kidneys to relatives, but I've never seen a person donate a kidney to a brother they just met. You are a special person." "I'm just doing what I feel is right," Evan replied. "I can't live a life without him." The surgery was scheduled for a week later. Throughout that week, Evan and Ben had a lot of time to talk. They talked about their pasts, their childhoods, the memories they had unconsciously shared. They discovered they had the same habits, the same interests. They had the same smile, the same eyes. They had lived two different lives, but they were still one. Lily, with her maturity, was mentally prepared for the surgery. She had made yellow and blue paper dandelions, one for her dad and one for her uncle. She believed those flowers would bring them luck. The night before the surgery, Evan and Ben talked on the phone. Ben said he was very scared. "I'm afraid I won't wake up. I'm afraid I'll leave Lily and Leo behind." "You'll be fine," Evan said, his voice full of reassurance. "I'll be there with you. I'm not going anywhere. And when you wake up, I'll be there to greet you." Ben fell silent. He felt a great sense of relief. For the first time in his life, he didn't have to fight alone. He had a brother, a person who would fight with him. The next morning, Evan was taken to the operating room. He held the blue paper dandelion Lily had given him tightly. He closed his eyes, and for the first time in years, he no longer felt lonely. He felt a connection, a warmth. He felt he was on the right path. The surgery was successful. Evan's kidney was transplanted into Ben's body. When Evan woke up, his first question was about Ben. "How is he?" he asked the nurse. "The surgery was a success, Mr. Morgan. The kidney has started working," the nurse replied. Evan smiled. He felt a slight pain in his side, but that pain was nothing compared to the joy and relief in his heart. He had saved his brother's life. He had found a part of himself. And he had found the true meaning of life. Time in the hospital seemed to flow to its own rhythm, both slowly and swiftly. For Evan, the 5 days after the surgery were a series of contradictory moments. He felt a dull ache where the incision was, but it was a pain of life, of a part of his body bringing hope to another person. He recovered so quickly that the nurses were surprised. The controlling instinct and discipline of a billionaire businessman were now applied to his own recovery process. Ben, on the other hand, needed more time. Although Evan's kidney was working perfectly, Ben's body was too exhausted after months of battling his illness. He had to stay in the hospital for 14 days under close medical supervision. During these days, his room was never empty. Every morning, Lily and Leo were brought to the hospital by Mrs. Ellen Evans' former nanny. Mrs. Ellen, with her kind appearance and empathetic eyes, had become a grandmother figure in Lily's eyes. She cared for Leo, cooked delicious meals for the little girl, and listened to stories about the new world she was discovering. For Lily, the hospital was a place full of emotions. She was worried for Ben, but at the same time she felt safer than ever. She had a place to go, a person to rely on. She often sat next to Ben's bed, holding her father's thin hand, telling him about the things she saw, about the things Evan had taught her. One afternoon, after Evan had been discharged and was back home, he received a call from Dr. Reynolds. "Mr. Morgan Jake can be discharged in the next 2 days. I think you should prepare to welcome him home." Evan felt an unusual thrill. The last time he felt this way was when he was about to sign his first $1 million contract. But this time, it wasn't the thrill of ambition. It was the thrill of kinship. He immediately prepared everything. The ground floor bedroom was re-equipped for Ben's easy mobility. A medical table, a recliner, and various medications were made ready. When Ben arrived home, he looked at the room with a puzzled expression. "You've gone too far, Evan," he said. "I'm not an invalid." "The doctor said you need to rest properly," Evan replied, helping Ben into the wheelchair the doctor had requested for the first few days. "Recovering from surgery is no joke." Ben looked at Evan, a half smile appearing on his face. "You talk as if you're not in any pain. I can see you're limping." That was how the two brothers interacted. The gentle teasing hid sincere concern. They were like two old friends who had lost touch for years, but as soon as they reunited, everything felt familiar again. Life in the large mansion began to change. The place that was once filled with silence was now full of Leo's laughter, Lily's tiny footsteps, and the non-stop conversations between Ben and Evan. Evan learned how to care for children. He learned how to mix formula, change diapers, and soothe Leo to sleep. He even learned how to cook. One evening, as Evan was trying to make macaroni and cheese, Lily walked into the kitchen looking at him skeptically. "You've never cooked before, have you?" she asked. "Never," Evan admitted. "I usually order food or have a chef." Lily climbed onto a chair and sat next to him. "I can help you. I used to cook for Dad when he was tired." Her offer made Evan's heart ache. A 9-year-old child had to do things that he, a billionaire, had never even had to think about. "That would be great," Evan replied, trying to keep his voice from trembling. "A private cooking lesson," Lily instructed Evan seriously. She showed him how to boil water, cook the pasta, and make the sauce. Dad usually adds a little mustard. It gives it a special flavor. "Where did you learn that?" Evan asked, following her instructions. "From my mom," Lily answered, her voice softening. "Before she left." That was the first time she had mentioned her mother. Evan listened silently. "Did your mom like to cook?" he asked, trying to keep his voice neutral. "She didn't mean to leave," Lily whispered. "She passed away when Leo was born." Evan felt an invisible pain. He sat down next to Lily, taking her small hand. "I'm so sorry, Lily. That must have been so hard." Lily shook her head. "Dad cried a lot. After that, we didn't talk about her anymore. It was too sad." "What about you? Are you sad?" Evan asked. Lily shrugged. "Sometimes I forget what her face looked like. I had a picture, but we lost it when we had to leave our first apartment." Evan remained silent, trying to comprehend what this family had been through. Losing a mother, a home, living in poverty. Everything seemed too much for a child to bear. "The nights were the worst," Lily continued, her voice a whisper. "It was so cold. and Leo cried a lot. Dad tried to keep us warm even when he was shivering. He always said things would get better, that one day we'd have a home again. She looked around the large kitchen. I bet Dad never imagined a home like this, she said, giving a small smile. Evan felt a lump in his throat. Lily, you are a very brave little girl. You know that. She shrugged again. It's not bravery. It's just what you have to do. After Leo was sound asleep, Evan and Ben sat on the porch talking into the night. Lily told me she learned to cook from her mom, Evan said. Yes, Ben replied. My wife Lisa was a good cook. She always wanted to open a small restaurant, but it never happened. Evan looked at Ben, sensing the sadness in his voice. You've lost so much. And you've found so much, Ben responded, his voice full of appreciation. You found a family, a purpose. You had a dream life, but you chose to stay with me. I can never thank you enough. You don't have to thank me, Evan said, his voice sincere. You gave me a priceless gift. You gave me a family. I had everything, but I never had true happiness. I was living an empty life. You filled that void, Ben. Ben looked at Evan. Two men, identical in face, but with two completely different lives. They were once strangers, but now they were brothers. I think Leo likes you, Lily said, looking down at her little brother. Dad also needs your help until he gets better. What about you? Evan asked, trying to keep his voice normal. Do you like me? Lily looked at Evan with her deep eyes. You're strange, she said. You don't know how to cook, and you have so many things you don't use. But you're kind, and you're like my dad, not just on the outside. It was the greatest compliment Evan had ever received. That night, when Lily called him Uncle Evan, for the first time he felt a warmth spread through his chest. He realized he had found where he belonged. He was no longer a solitary billionaire. He was a brother, an uncle, a friend. He was part of a family. Ben's recovery was nothing short of miraculous. With each passing day, he regained a bit more strength. Evan's care, Lily's love, and Leo's laughter became a more effective medicine than any prescription. Within a month, Ben was able to walk normally again, and he began to regain his self-confidence. Evan didn't say a word about returning to work. He canceled all his meetings and refused every call. His business empire operated on its own without him, and he realized it didn't need him as much as he had thought. He dedicated all his time to Ben, Lily, and Leo. He had learned to do things he never imagined. He would play games with Lily, read books to Leo, and talk with Ben about the small things in life. One morning, as Evan was preparing breakfast, Ben walked into the kitchen. I think it's time for us to find another place to live, he said, his voice full of hesitation. Evan stopped, his heart seeming to skip a beat. He turned to look at Ben, fear visible in his eyes. Why don't you like it here? It's not that, Ben replied. This house is too big. It's your world, not ours. We're a burden. You have your own life and empire to manage. My life is here now, Evan said. My empire is here now. You're not a burden, Ben. You're a part of me. So are Lily and Leo. You have changed my life. I was living an empty life, and now you have filled it. Ben looked at Evan. He saw the sincerity in his brother's eyes. He saw the longing for a family, a longing he once had himself. He knew that Evan was not lying. He had truly found a family. Ben nodded, and a smile appeared on his face. In that case, I guess we need to redecorate this house. It's too minimalistic for a family with kids. Evan smiled. That's great. What color do you like? Yellow, Ben said. The color of dandelions. And that was how their life began. Evan's mansion was transformed into a real home. The second floor, which once housed unused guest bedrooms, was now filled with children's laughter and toys. Lily's room was painted yellow with glowing stars on the ceiling. Leo's room was decorated with colorful paintings. Evan's study was turned into a library where Ben could read and Evan could work. Evan had learned how to be a father. He learned how to listen to Lily read books, how to help her with her homework. He learned how to play with Leo, how to soothe the baby to sleep. He had become a completely different man. One morning when Evan walked into the kitchen, he saw Ben making pancakes. Lily was helping him, and Leo was sitting in his high chair, clapping his hands excitedly. "We made you a surprise breakfast," Lily said. Evan smiled. He sat down at the table, and Ben placed a plate of pancakes in front of him. Evan took a bite, and he felt a great joy. The pancakes weren't perfect, but they were made with love. One afternoon, when Evan was working in his office, Lily walked in holding a yellow paper flower. "This flower is to keep," she said, "because you stayed." Evan took the flower. He felt a warmth spread through his chest. He looked at Lily, and he realized that he had found the true meaning of life. The story ends with a photo. The photo is hung on the wall right next to Evan's university degree and his awards. The photo shows Evan, Ben, Lily, and Leo smiling brightly in the park. 4 people, 2 different lives, but in the end, they found each other. And that is the story of the Dandelion Promise. A promise of survival, of love, and of a true family. And so Evan's life changed forever. From a man living in the world of success, he discovered the true value of life in love and connection. What he once thought was most important now seemed insignificant, as he realized that family and genuine relationships are what truly matter. But Evan's story is just a reminder, no matter where we are or what we have, there are always greater things waiting for us. Sometimes it only takes one moment to change everything, and our lives can take a new turn. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe so you won't miss out on more inspiring and meaningful stories in future videos. Leave your thoughts in the comments. We'd love to hear from you.